Donald Trump, who tried to undo a free and fair election, who still denies the will of the people. He would be a dictator on day one.
Donald Trump has become more confused.
In Springfield, they're eating the dogs, the people that came in. They're eating the cats. Kamala Harris is a train wreck who has destroyed everything in her path. She's a disaster. If we lose this election, we may not have a country anymore. Have you heard her laugh? That is the laugh of a crazy person.
Hello and welcome to the Nexus. The US election is now just days away, and today we're going to be taking a look at both candidates' dire warnings that this will be the last Democratic vote if they don't win. We've split the panel into Democrats and Republicans, and we've split the show into examining Trump's case versus Harris's case, and we'll try to give them equal time. So, without further ado, and in no particular order, let's hear from Donald Trump.
If she becomes the President of the United States, which I can't believe can happen, I don't think this country is going to make it. I don't think we'll ever be. I think just really bad things will happen to our country. This election is a choice between whether we will have 4 more years of incompetence and disaster, or whether we will begin the 4 greatest years in the history of our country. The fate of our nation is in your hands. Our country is being destroyed and crippled by Kamala Harris. Kamala is importing millions of illegals across our borders and giving them taxpayer benefits at your expense. We're not going to have a country left with these people. We're a dumping ground. We're like a garbage can for the world.
The number of migrants illegally crossing the U.S.-Mexico border has risen.
All-time record crossing the southern border.
For 4 straight years, Kamala Harris has imported an army of illegal alien gang members. They walk through that open border and probably say, man, are these people stupid? She's not a smart person. She's a low IQ individual. She is. Who could do this? Who could do this to our country?
What's happening has to be intentional. There's no other way to explain what's going on.
They couldn't make it any more obvious what they are trying to achieve.
The only way we're going to have a great future in America is if we welcome and embrace immigrants, the dreamers, and all of them, because our ultimate goal is to help the dreamers, but get a path to citizenship for all 11 million or however many undocumented there are here.
That's what they want. They want more voters. They want more citizens that will thank them for letting them into the country. And that's only going to cause more people to come.
Why do you think the border's open? To change Texas. They win Texas, we can't win the presidency. It's that simple. We can't overcome California and Texas.
This is the end game.
Yeah.
Immediately upon taking the oath of office, I will launch the largest deportation program in American history. They have to leave. They have to leave. I'm sorry. We want to have people come in, but we want them to come in legally, right?
This is not your father's Democratic Party. They are now full on to Marxism and socialism. What they envision for us is that we would be some sort of European-style Marxist borderless utopia. We all know that's a dangerous fool's errand.
Marxist parties want power. The Democrat Party has embraced that ideology.
The United States is now an occupied country, but on November 5th, 2024, we will call that Liberation Day. It's going to be Liberation. Kamala, you're fired. Get out. Get out. Get out. You're fired.
Okay, let's bring in our guests now. We have, in essence, 2 Republicans, former Trump appointee Matthew Bartlett and political commentator Janelle King. And on the other side, we have Laura Fink and David Shuster, our 2 Democratic strategists. Welcome to the program, all 4 of you, in no particular order. Matthew Bartlett, you've heard what Trump has said about Kamala Harris being the threat to American democracy. How can you justify that?
Well, I'm not sure you can. Let's just be clear. This is a very, very close election. Stakes are high, tensions are high, and it is hugely consequential. but the rhetoric around it, needs to be a bit put in context. Yes, this is an American presidential election, and both sides are compelled to win. Yet, the country will go on. The beauty of our country is not the person or even the president who sits in the Oval Office. Extraordinary country where you have self-determination. So yes, it's important, but no matter who wins, if Kamala Harris were to continue on, or if President Trump were to win, our democracy will maintain its integrity.
Matthew, Trump's point is that if Kamala wins, she and the Democrat Party in general will attempt to make illegal citizens legal, and therefore, because they tend to lean towards the Democrat Party, that's it. You become a one-party state.
As we've seen before, immigration continues to be a supercharged issue, in yet again another American presidential election. Yet, as we have also seen, Hispanics and those that are coming to this country may not be, such a monolithic bloc for the Democratic Party. We once thought that was the case. It seems as if many are turning towards Republican conservative policies around the economy. So all is unclear, all is uncertain. Nothing is taken for granted. Yet again, this issue continues to be a polarizing and a very partisan issue.
Okay, we'll finish the Republican side of the argument with Janelle. Janelle, are you worried as Trump is?
So not at all, but the reason being is because first I think we have to establish that America is not a democracy. We're a representative republic. Thank God we're not a democracy. And in California, we're running everything. That's the state that has the most population. That being said, I think it's important to note that out of 300 million people, 2 individuals are not going to destroy our republic. What can destroy our republic is policy. And there are several policy statements and policy positions that the left takes that leads just straight into socialism. The way they have taken over the education system, the way they have canceled everyone who has a difference of opinion, not to mention the fact that they put us all in coalitions. I'm not just an American, I'm a Black American. I'm not just a woman, I'm a Black woman. So it's all these coalitions that Democrats create that lead us into socialism, which is where the threat comes from and what we are concerned about.
Well,
so it's not individuals I'm concerned about, it's bad policy.
Well, forgive me for sounding naive, but why does Trump keep going on about it being the end of the country if the other side wins? He doesn't mean it then?
Well, no, it's the fact that when I look at Kamala's policies, as I stated earlier, it's not the individual, it's what they're presenting. I don't know a policy that she has presented that doesn't have a social safety net built in. Whenever we start adding the government into our decision making, and now we have to work alongside the government to do everything with our lives, that will lead us into a collapse. Whenever the government is responsible for our health care, that will lead us into a collapse, particularly when we only have around 1.1 million medical professionals, and we have about 60 million people on Medicare. So now we have a major problem. Or Medicaid. So we have a major problem there when we allow the government to take over areas of our lives that we should be responsible for. That's where President Trump is concerned.
Let's get the Democratic side now. And David Shuster, is it the Democrats' plan to turn all undocumented migrants into citizens and make them Democrat voters?
No, of course not. But the easy way for Republicans to try to not be so worried about immigrants is if they had policies that immigrants actually liked, if they actually took care of people who came to this country both legally and if they had a path to citizenship. There was a bill that was in the U.S. Senate that was exactly what Republicans wanted, that the Republicans killed this year because they didn't want to hand Joe Biden and Kamala Harris a political victory. That's what the Republican Party stands for, is trying to get things done only for them to be in political power. So when Democrats are accused of, socialism, it's pretty rich given that Donald Trump's favorite benefactor, Elon Musk, has gotten billions of dollars in government subsidies for his various businesses. And Republicans seem to not want the government involved in our lives, except when it's involved in women's reproductive lives. And then the government gets to decide what women do.
David,
the arguments of the Republicans are a bit rich. But again, to the larger point, there will not be the end of democracy. There will not be the end of the United States. But there may be some problems as far as the Constitution is concerned if, in fact, Donald Trump wins.
David, didn't the Republicans turn down that bill because they were angry that it was tied to many billions of dollars of military aid to Ukraine and Israel, or Ukraine especially?
Well, yes, but they also supported aid to Israel. And by the way, that bill had thousands of Border Patrol agents that they wanted. It had many new courts to help process immigration. It had new equipment and infrastructure for security. What happens in the United States is you don't always get everything you want. Sometimes you have to get most of what you want, and then you get a couple other things to make the bill. The bills are sort of more widespread. There's a larger bill than just immigration security. And that's the way Washington works. And that's the way Republicans have understood that Washington works, except when Donald Trump comes along and whines and complains and says the Democrats are somehow trying to get rid of our democracy because we're welcoming immigrants. This is a nation of immigrants.
Laura, quick question for you. If Kamala wins, is that the end of the two-party system? It just becomes a one-party state with Democrats?
Let's just be clear. Both of these fictions that you bring up are from Donald Trump's mouth. Or the first is a fiction, excuse me, this idea of immigrants coming over and becoming citizens and outnumbering Republicans or conservatives. It's ridiculous on its face. However, I take Donald Trump at his word when he says he's going to be a dictator on day one.
We'll tackle that in the second debate. We'll tackle that in the second debate, Laura. However, did I not hear Chuck Schumer and other Democrats saying we need to give 10 million illegal immigrants the path to citizenship? Did he not say that?
He talks about the path to citizenship, which, by the way, the Chamber of Commerce and conservative groups do agree on. You want to see comprehensive immigration reform, but that does not have to do with those particular numbers. What I will say is this, that Republicans are not interested in solutions. That is why you heard my colleague talk about Donald Trump making a couple of phone calls to kill what Senator James Lankford, who authored the bill, called the most conservative border enforcement mechanism in 4 decades. This is an issue they like to campaign on and make noise about every 4 years, but they don't like to solve the problem. And I also want to acknowledge one other thing brought up by my colleague across the aisle, which is this government interference in healthcare specifically. We see with the repeal of Dobbs that the government has never been more involved in women's bodies, in their healthcare, in their livelihoods, and that's something that I think voters are moving against. That is why conservative women specifically are looking at Kamala Harris, maybe for the first time, voting for a Democrat. So we see this election on a razor's edge because of Donald Trump and the extremism that he represents.
Laura, stay with us. Thank you. We're about to hear Kamala Harris's case now, but before we do, let's quickly consult the citizens of the world who are living in the British capital. Who do they think is the biggest threat to the American democracy?
Who do you think is the biggest threat to U.S. democracy, Donald Trump or Kamala Harris?
So the U.S. is not a democracy, it's a republic, it's a rule of law. And I would say the biggest threat to our republic is Kamala Harris. Trump has been in office before, and during his years in office, instead of, he's being referred to as a Hitler, as a fascist, taking government control when actually he made decisions that pushed control back down to the states and back down to the people.
Donald Trump, without a doubt.
Can I ask why you think that?
Well, I think his past actions, what he did in office, how he degraded the US presidency. I mean, there's no chance they should have someone like that in office again, in my opinion.
Oh, Trump is the biggest threat to democracy.
Okay, and why do you think so?
Because he's insane.
Donald Trump talks angry, more than Kamala, but yeah, I think people who have a big mouth can easily say something wrong, which can be dangerous for other people. Yeah.
Donald Trump, absolutely. I've already voted for Kamala.
Okay, and why do you think he'd be the biggest threat to democracy?
He just stands for everything that's bad. Like he's anti-immigration, he stands for hate and fear-mongering. Just not a fan. He's not a good man. He doesn't stand for anything that's good. And I really despise the fact that there's so many Americans that want to vote for him.
I know nothing about Kamala at all. Trump's a bit of a nutter though, isn't he? Do you think? Or
thank you.
Would he blow us up for nothing, like? But I know nothing about Kamala Harris to know whether she's any better than Trump.
Kamala.
Yeah? Why?
If you take a look at the Biden administration for 4 years of constantly doing executive orders overriding things like debt, the border, not to mention the fiasco of our finances. She's a deeply unpopular vice president with a deeply unpopular president.
Well, some interesting views there from the public. As always, before we go back to the debate, let's hear from Kamala Harris now, why she thinks this will be the end of U.S. democracy if Trump wins.
Donald Trump has openly vowed, if re-elected, to be a dictator on day one.
No. I am not going to be a dictator.
It is well known he exchanged love letters with Kim Jong-un.
He wrote me beautiful letters, and they're great letters. We fell in love.
These dictators and autocrats are rooting for you to be president again because they're so clear. They can manipulate you with flattery and favors.
Total respect for Donald Trump and for Donald Trump's very, very large brain.
While Donald Trump was president, he said he wanted generals like Adolf Hitler had.
And you, sir, are worse than Hitler.
I'm not a Nazi. I'm the opposite of a Nazi.
He said he will weaponize, essentially, the Department of Justice against his political enemies. And even called for the, quote, termination of the Constitution of the United States.
Hasta la vista, baby.
I've been going through a witch hunt for years.
Donald Trump has repeatedly called his fellow Americans the enemy from within.
It is the enemy from within, and they're very dangerous.
Look, Trump speaks in hyperbole. This is nothing new. He's not talking about using the military to attack people who disagree with him politically or anything like that.
He is literally saying that! He is literally saying that!
We know who he would target because he has attacked them before. Journalists whose stories he doesn't like. Election officials who refuse to cheat.
You are fake news.
This is a person, Donald Trump, who tried to undo a free and fair election, who still denies the will of the people, who incited a violent mob to attack the United States Capitol.
USA! USA! That was a day of love.
Either way, will you accept the results of the election?
Yeah, sure, if it's a fair election.
His former chief of staff, his national security advisor, former secretaries of defense, and his vice president have all called him unfit and dangerous.
Weak, stupid people.
World leaders have come up to me expressing their real concern about this election.
Make America great again. Make Europe great again. Hoira Donald Trump.
I don't think it's hyperbolic to say this genuinely could be the last Democratic election we ever have.
You're right.
Do you think Donald Trump is a fascist?
Yes, I do.
David, Republicans will no doubt say that that is hyperbole. He was taken out of context. Why do you take him at his word?
Well, Donald Trump, according to his own former White House chief of staff, admired Adolf Hitler's generals, and Donald Trump, according to his former staffers, is fascist to the core. When you look at what Donald Trump's own former staffers and White House aides have said about him, and you go back to January 6th, when Donald Trump inspired an insurrection to try to stop the certification of a democratically sound election, it's no wonder that a lot of people in the United States are terrified that maybe if Donald Trump gets into office now and he keeps talking about using the military and the National Guard to target enemies of within. And when he's asked, what do you mean by enemies of within? And he starts naming Democrats. So there's every reason to believe that Donald Trump is going to do what he says, and that is he will go after his enemies. He will throw out the Constitution. He will try to do things that have never been done in this country before. And so when Democrats talk about the damage to democracy, that's what they're talking about. Donald Trump is not a normal politician who cares about the Constitution, who cares about the rights that are enshrined for all of us in this country.
But David, it's not as if it's unprecedented. We've had a Trump presidency and none of those things happened, unless you're going to talk about January the 6th, but that didn't overthrow democracy.
Well, Donald Trump got impeached twice for doing things that the Congress thought were inappropriate. No U.S. president has ever been impeached twice. Donald Trump has got all sorts of criminal cases against him for his actions, never mind what he did on January 6th. He took classified documents down with him to Florida and perhaps may have sold them to some of his friends. I mean, Donald Trump has done things that no U.S. president has ever done before. It makes Watergate and the Nixon scandal look like nothing. That's why Democrats are so terrified, because Donald Trump is more senile and demented now than he was when he was president.
That's very funny. Yes, he was impeached twice, but he was acquitted twice too. Laura Fink, do you take him at his word?
I do take him at his word. And to your earlier point, the difference between the first Trump administration and now his decision to be a dictator are the people that he surrounds himself by. So you see former Joint Chiefs of Staff General James Mattis coming out and saying that he is a danger to America. You see John Kelly, who was his chief of staff and also a former general, saying that he admires fascists. Like, all of these things are real. And those people were guardrails against his worst instincts. They used distraction and various techniques to try to keep him from implementing his worst instincts. And we will not see that in the second Trump term. With Project 2025, we see that not only will he surround himself with yes men, he will also be emptying the government of nonpartisan officials and filling them with Trump loyalists. All of this means that the guardrails will have collapsed, and that, along with his decline and his age and his inability to be coherent, means a very dangerous potential for America. And I think what you see in particular, there are women, Republican women and conservative-leaning women right now in swing states. And maybe they sat out the election before, maybe they voted for Donald Trump. They are deeply aware of this problem, and they could be the decision makers in this election because they have to think long and hard, and are thinking long and hard about potentially voting for Kamala Harris, even though ideologically they may disagree. But for security reasons and the protection of the Constitution, they may have to vote for Kamala Harris because of the danger that Trump represents.
Okay, a lot of points for you to sift through there, Janelle. The guardrails have come off. He's got authoritarian, dictatorial instincts. He's said to admire fascists. He's a bit like Hitler. He talks in word salads, but I thought that was supposed to be Kamala. Anyway, Janelle, defend your president.
Yeah, I know. I think it's fascinating as I'm listening to Democrats say that they're taking President Trump at his word. No, they're taking him at the words that they cherry pick to fit their narrative. Because when he says that he has nothing to do with Project 25, they keep saying he does. So every time he does say something that doesn't go along with their narrative, they choose not to take him at his word then, but then they decide to take him at his word when it comes to certain other topics because it fits their narrative. And that is the Democrat Party way. That is how they push their people to the poll, by pushing narratives that they create in their heads. First of all, abortion is not health care. I need us to stop saying that. It's not reproductive care because you're not reproducing anything. You are killing a child. So that's number one. Number two, there is a path to citizenship here in America. It's called legal immigration. There is a legal immigration process that we have. And to say that illegal immigrants somehow should have the same rights as legal immigrants is a problem. And to assume that the Republican Party is sometimes anti-immigration or anti-immigrants because of the fact that we are anti-illegal immigration is also a lie. That's the narrative that we continue to hear over and over and over again. The plan that was put before us to address the immigration problem should never have to be in place because we shouldn't have had the problem. And that's where I have an issue with this administration. They fail to take accountability for any of the bad policies that they have presented that we are now forced to have to live through.
Final answer, Matthew Bartlett. Is Trump going to be a dictator from day one?
Listen, Donald Trump is a figure that most Americans have known their entire life. And then for the better part of a decade, he has been in the public political domain. And probably every American alive has heard everything that can be said about him already. We've had 4 years as him as president. Let's just be honest. He is a rare bird. He does make outlandish statements. Some of his behavior may be questionable and out of bounds. But when it comes to the election, Joe Biden made his first, re-election message around democracy. It did not seem to be a politically potent and persuasive argument. You saw Kamala Harris then switch to the notion of freedom. They are now going back to the notion of Donald Trump is dangerous. I am not sure that that is the most powerful argument when you now have 3 U.S. senators in critical swing states running ads talking about how they have worked or will work with Donald Trump on critical issues regarding trade and other issues. So it is almost undercutting the Kamala Harris message the closing message that Donald Trump is dangerous, to have her own party running ads in battleground states that talk about how U.S. Senate candidates will work with Donald Trump. Listen, no matter who wins, this country will continue on. There are very critical issues. There are very critical matters. Guardrails will be up. Both sides have a responsibility to the country, but we're going to find out what happens in about a week.
Matthew Bartlett, Janelle King, Laura Fink, and David Shuster, thank you all very much for your analysis today. Really appreciate it. Thank you at home and on your phones for watching. If you want to see this episode or any of our previous episodes, do go to our channel on YouTube. Just type in Nexus TRT World. Till next week then, goodbye.